In this tutorial, we're going to see how to develop a raw picture with Darktable. I'll assume you've imported your picture, so for that you can drag and drop it onto the program, and you'll want to use the Darkroom, the part of the interface, the workspace where we can edit our picture's settings. This one works with a series of modules that you can activate or deactivate to accommodate for your workflow and your needs. On the right side of the interface, you can find all the modules, and there's a folded tab, a docker called More Modules, that allows you, once you click it to expand it, to pick the modules that you want to use. So if you are missing any of the modules we're going to see here, this is where you will find them in the More Modules category. I recommend to work more or less from the left to the right, starting with the basic group that will allow you to make big changes to the exposure, to the contrast and the saturation of your image, then working your way through the value composition in the tone group. You can go to the color group to tweak the colors with more fine-grained controls, to tweak the color balance and all that stuff. Then you have the corrections group, which will allow you to remove haze. You can do things like sharpening your image. You will find a few filters related to all of that. And finally, you have the special effects that I often use as well. I often use the gradient filter, also called graduated density. The other two tabs are for the modules that are active on your image, so that you can find them all in one place, and the modules that you added as favorites. Now let us start with the basic group, and one of the most important filters, I almost always start with the exposure. So I'm going to click it to expand the module, and first you can right-click on any module to apply a preset. Exposure comes with a preset called Magic Lantern Default, and this is an automated exposure setting that you can use to brighten your image. Often it doesn't quite give the results I want, but this makes it easy to further tweak the exposure by clicking and dragging on the histogram at the top of the interface. So I'm going to open up the dark parts of the image by pulling the left part of the histogram to the right. I'm going to lower the bright areas by pulling the right side of the histogram to the left. You can see that I'm pulling a lot of pixel information back into the image. You will see that when you do that, this updates the sliders into the exposure here, and you can tweak these sliders directly for a slightly faster result. You can tweak the target level slider to try to fit as much information as possible into the image. The base curve should be set for you, by the way, at the start when you import the image based on the camera manufacturer that you use. This one takes the raw pictures data and presents it on the screen, so it's not completely flat or too dark, or because each camera manufacturer uses a different curve to transform the colors from the raw data, which is linear, to what they present on your camera screen or in the JPEG preview. Then something I do almost all the time is use crop and rotate. You want to activate the module and then expand it to see the crop tool. And when I crop, I want to remove as much as I can of the picture. Everything that I don't want the viewer to focus on, I'm going to remove. So I want to get the nice trees on the right side. I want to remove this roof on the left without cropping too much of the picture. If I were to remove it entirely, I think this would be a little too much. So instead, I'm going to use a spot removal filter to remove that small part of the roof that's remaining. Unless I manage to frame this right. I think it's working pretty well this way. So I'm trying to get the fox on the left, aligned to the left of the image, and balanced out with the sign on the right. To confirm the crop, you just have to fold the module. Alright, sometimes I work with shadows and highlights at this point, and I have two presets that I've created manually to target either the shadows or the highlights. In this case, the highlights, the lighter areas of the image, are pretty bright already, but they're well balanced, so I don't want to touch them too much. If you activate the filter by default, it will tend to flatten out the image. It works pretty well on this one, but sometimes you want to only target the shadows. So for that, I've created a preset called Shadows Only, and this one has the highlight slider set to 0. So to recreate it, you'll want to set your settings so only the shadows are being affected, and then you click on the little menu icon and you can add this preset if it doesn't exist, or edit it if you already created the preset. At this point, I will lower the shadow sliders down because the boost in the shadows is a little too strong to me. At the same time, I want to boost the shadows on the fox, but not so much on the tree on the other hand. One way to test a filter is to use a really large value to see how the blur is working, for example, on this one, because boosting the shadows and highlights works with some blur in the middle, and it tends to wash out the image a little bit. You lose some details when you use these kinds of tools. You can change the blur's radius with the radius slider, and this one you have to be careful to balance it out. So I'm going to boost the shadows so you can see a little better what's happening. If I set the radius really low, you get these high frequency details and you're going to get lots of artifacts on your picture. So that's why you want to blur this effect, this boost effect on the shadows. And then I'm going to lower the shadows intensity, the lightness boost in the shadows back. Now toggle the filter on and off to see the difference. You can see it's quite subtle. That's what I'm going for. Okay, so on this picture, because I've got very dark areas, I want to go to the lightness group, to the tone group, and to use the tone curve. It's a curve that controls the lightness of the pixels on your image. You're going to have on the x-axis the input values and on the y-axis the output values. So for example, on the dark parts of my image, which are on the left side of the picture that's represented here, you can see this reflects my histogram. If I add a point and I pull it up, the boost in lightness is going to go up as you get to that part of the shadows, and it's going to smoothly go back down softly towards the sky. And the advantage of that curve is that if I create a linear chunk using the soft grid that you can see on the picture, I can make sure that Darktable doesn't brighten certain areas of my image. So you will find some of the control you have in shadows and highlights here. You can achieve some of that. You can target only the shadows by adding a point in the middle here on the grid. And if I toggle this filter on and off, you will see that mostly affects the shadows. And then I can tone down the effect on my shadows and move the point to get the visual result that I want. So on the video, as it's compressed, it might be hard to see. I'm lucky to have a good screen here that has good color representation. And so I can use it. I can use my eyes to see that I'm getting the result that I want. I want a soft boost in the shadows here, and I'm flattening out the shadow, the shading on the fox because it's quite reflective. I'm also going to try and lower the sky a little bit. Let's see, do we want to boost it? Actually, boosting the lightness on the leaves on the tree isn't that bad, so I'm going to go with that for now. When you retouch a photo like that, you want to take creative decisions. So I want some light to guide the eye to the fox here. I want to create some contrast between the foreground and the background. And the way you know what works and what doesn't is with experimentation. So I know, for example, that really specific dark area that has more or less of a geometric shape, here I can target it, I can lighten it with a graduated filter, which we're going to do a bit later. But for now, I'm going to go to the color group and I'll start with something I do often. I like very colorful pictures, so I tend to use vibrance quite a bit, and I have a preset to set it on high, to set it to 80%. And it tends to boost the reds quite a lot and the blue of the sky as well, which I particularly like. It's going to draw the attention even a little more to the fox. I will try the color correction group, try to warm up the picture, use the warming filter preset. It's not working too well in this case, so I'm going to keep these natural colors. And I think we are good for now for the color group. There's not so much to do on this picture. On the next group, I don't have anything to do, nothing to correct here. So I'm going to go to the last group and use graduated density. This is a gradient filter that is supposed to represent your graduated filters that you can slot in on your camera's lens. And if I move the widget here, the filter will activate, and you can see that I can add a soft gradient to the sky to darken it. But if I invert the density, if I make it lower than 0 EV, it's going to add light instead. And then I can create a lightning gradient on the bottom right corner of my picture. So you can see the difference here. Now, I'm not only going to do that, I'm going to remove some of that filter, some of that effect with masking. So we're going to go to the blend option, which you have on every filter, and I'm going to select drawn and parametric mask. This lets me use not only masking using the pixels of my picture, using the lightness information, I can also draw a mask by hand. So I can target the corner here, the bottom right corner with the faces, the people walking in the frame, to leave them darker than the fox and the places in the picture where I want people to focus their attention. So I'm going to click the icon in the bottom right to visualize the mask. It's going to turn my image yellow. And I want to make sure that first I'm not touching the lighter parts of my picture. So I'm going to remove the lighter parts of the input picture, the picture that is going to see the filter applied at first. And so the way you use this filter, if you are dragging the right portion, if you want to remove the light parts of the picture, you click and drag on the bottom element, the dark one, to the left. And once you reach the point where you are satisfied with what you are removing, you can soften the transition between what's masked out, what's removed, and what's kept by pulling it back to the right. And it's going to create a gradient between the two stops that you have in here. So this way I can mostly remove the sky, and as my graduate filter is mostly applying to the bottom right of my image, we are just making sure that this part of the sky, the lighter part of the sky that's right behind the fox, is not going to be brightened too much. So then I can click on the mask representation icon to see the result. I can turn the filter on and off, and you can see that it's not affecting the sky anymore. And with that, by brightening the fox, I can make its silhouette pop a little better out of the sky. Then you can fine-tune your mask visually, looking at the picture continuously. And I'm going to draw a gradient here, a gradient filter. So I'm going to select the gradient icon and click once to add a gradient widget. And this one is going to tune out some of the colors here. So it's going to mask some of the picture out. And you want to use your mouse wheel, or here I'm using the little key ring on my Wacom device to turn it, because I'm working with the stylus. And I'm using that gradient to make it so the two heads in the bottom right of the composition are not being brightened. I can expand that gradient a little bit and move it to have even less of the picture brightened in the bottom right and to target a little more of the fox. Now when I toggle the filter off and back on, you can see that it's mostly brightening the center of the picture. I'm also going to add some warm color to it. So I'll go into the orange side of the hue slider and add a bit of saturation. So there again, I'm going to start with a very saturated color, very exaggerated, just to be able to see what's happening in my picture very clearly. And once I'm satisfied with the color, maybe more of a yellow to give it a sunny effect. A red makes it look a little more grim. So I want to go into the yellows, but not so much into the greens. And then I tone down the saturation. And I use that to warm up the foreground in my composition and the tree in the background. So the elements I want to draw the viewer's attention to. There we go. You can see it's adding a bit of warmth to the picture. And with that, we have a base composition to work with. So what I'll do at this point often is take a snapshot, well, compress the history stack maybe before, take a snapshot, and then I'll go back to my base curve, to the start picture, and jump between the two steps in the history. And you can see how we have a slightly mushy dark picture, we have an unwanted element in the composition, and the final picture is mostly just that cleaned up. We can do more retouching. We could really mask out the fox, for example, and boost its contrast a lot. Okay, so that's an overview of my editing process in Darktable. If you have more questions, want more tutorials, please say it in the comments. Be sure to share it because my ability to make videos depends a lot on you watching them and people discovering them. But that said, I want to thank you kindly for watching. Be creative, have fun, and we'll see one another in the next one. Bye-bye.